Dead by Daylight players, let's talk about one of my least favorite topics in DBD, and that's the DC penalty. If you guys don't hang out on Twitter like me, you might not be aware that there's this reoccurring topic of discussing penalties for DCing. This round's added twist is attacking players who use the unhook mechanic to avoid the penalty, and I have an unpopular opinion on this. I want to put this on the record before we get too far in. I'm not a player who generally DCs. When I game, basically the only times I DC are if my toddler needs me, and obviously my kid is coming before a video game, or if a match looks like it's lost, I'll give up on hook to give a survivor a chance at hatch. I personally don't like being the last survivor, so I will gladly give up on hook so someone else can do the hatch race. Now, I honestly hate this topic for a couple of reasons. The big one is that it shows the disdain the community has for itself, which to me is awful because there are so many amazing players. I've met so many cool people over the years of playing Dead by Daylight, and I hate that we're always giving the worst people attention. I know that's something that will never go away because we all love drama, but there is something to be said about talking about unhappy players that just brings out like this extra level of hate. The second is why are we so comfortable punishing as adults simply because they're not enjoying a game that they paid for? No one wants to have wasted $40+ on a game just to get on and then hate every second of it. And let's not kid ourselves. We all know there are players out there who get on and their goal is to make the other side miserable. People like that exist in every genre of every game. I think though what makes it so especially painful in DBD is that while DBD is the largest asymmetrical horror game, it still has a small community when you think about other titles that have been out just as long. So you're coming across these toxic players with a little bit more frequency than say you would in Overwatch and Destiny 2. I also think there's something to be said about the unbalanced aspect of DBD that kind of brings out this toxicity as well. And then finally, I just don't think the logic of these arguments ever stands up to itself, because players love calling survivors who DC or force a kill selfish. But here's the thing, you're almost never getting a serious DC when you're in a Swift, and more of the player base than not solo queues. So this is a bunch of players calling people selfish because they don't want to stick around for strangers, or players that they're unlikely to ever recognize again. And to me, what's worse? Putting yourself first in a group of strangers in something as unserious as a video game, or demanding a stranger give up their time to appease you. Personally, I'm not in the business of making demands of people I don't know or that I'm not really interacting with. Now, I do think there is something to be said about looking into why people are DCing and trying to prevent it. But as a player base, we gotta stop looking at punishing our fellow players. Making an unpleasant experience more unpleasant isn't going to incentivize players to stick around. And that's honestly where I think these conversations go wrong, is that so many players are looking to create harsher penalties for DCing when penalties haven't solved the problem. In fact, we can see DCs happening more frequently when punishments have been implemented for years. It's just that when the penalties get harsher, players look for ways around it. I really think there needs to be a shift in focusing on punishing players for wanting to leave to incentivizing players to stay. And you can argue that blood points are the incentive, but if you're a veteran player like me, blood points don't mean anything. Personally, I have every survivor perk unlocked. I have the majority of killer perks unlocked. Survivors are basically just a cosmetic at this point. Whether I get any blood points at the end of the match or not, it's not going to do anything for my gameplay, really. I think this could be a really good opportunity for the developers to make more use of iridescent shards. In my opinion, these are the most painfully underused currency in Dead by Daylight. For players who might not be aware, iridescent shards are DBD's earned currency. You can use them to buy any non-licensed items in the game, including characters. Although, side note on this, there are still some original skins that are locked behind Auroch cells. The developers made a promise last year that original cosmetics would be accessible through shards, but they have still yet to make good on that promise. Now, primarily you earn shards through leveling up. But this past home, the developers did add shards to the Rift, so players who completed the Rift earned, I want to say it was about 7,500 shards, which is basically what a player playing 40 hours a week could earn in about 9 to 10 months. I think when there are rates of high DCs or self-kills, which the developer should have the data on, I think they should introduce an incentive period where each consecutive game you play can earn you iridescent shards. Think of it like a blood point event or a login event. Any streak would be ended by a DC or a kill that happens after 2 missed skill checks. That just happens to be the quickest way to kill yourself on hook, so I think that's a really good indicator of purposely trying to get out of the match. And for me, I don't even think we need to do a crazy amount of shards, Basing on what they gave in the tome, which was anywhere between 200 to 500 shards depending on the level, I think you could give players 10 shards with increasing increments of 5 shards up to whatever daily cap the developers think is best. This way you're rewarding players who stick it out in matches, and the developers can be sparing with this currency that they're determined to be tight-fisted with. But these are my thoughts on the recent conversation around players DCing or killing themselves. What do you guys think? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more content, don't forget to like and subscribe so I can bring you more DVD content.